Would you agree with me if I said that the biggest names of the masculinity and self-improvement space just feel hollow? We have First Man, Tate, Jordan Peterson, and Hamza. All of these, unshakable pillars of wisdom, all of them just feel hollow and the entire space just feels barren. I did this poll and 90% agreed with me that they felt a vibe shift. They felt that something had changed. And the comments just reinforced my belief that we are, in fact, a period of transition. Even Hamza is losing support, not just in numbers, but also in public perception. Are we at the end of the Hamza era? You likely know this, but I actually worked very closely with Hamza for months during his meteoric rise from 500K to 1 million subscribers. So I personally know him. I worked as a thinker and strategizer. He's far more intelligent than his empathetic personality conveys. I'm going to continue to do that exact same job in this video by analyzing the entire masculinity and self-improvement space and tell you exactly what's going to happen in the next 8 months. To understand Hamza's rise and fall, we need to look at the broader context. And we need to look at the timeline of his ascent. I'm going to take you back all the way to 2014 when the story of the masculinity movement on YouTube first started. So most people don't actually know this, but the current masculinity era comes from the dark days of the PUA, the pickup artist era. The older guys might know what I'm talking about, right? So I started watching YouTube around 2014, and this was during the dying gasps of the PUA movement. The PUA movement was basically a collection of guys who figured out the exact tricks and techniques to get laid. So we had the OGs like Neil Strauss and Mystery. And some of the terms from this movement are still in circulation today. Things like approach anxiety, body count, negging, pickup lines, day game, cold approach. All these terms came from that cultural movement. The PUA movement, it even went mainstream in 2005 to 2010. Neil Strauss wrote The Game in, I think, 2005. It was a book, very successful book, which brought in a whole new crowd of young, horny guys who wanted to get laid at all costs. Mystery even had a show on MTV back when MTV was still a thing. Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother was a PUA. So I started following and learning this stuff back in the day and in the tail end of the movement. And the threads had already begun to unravel. Mystery lost his mind. Neil Strauss lost his soul and went through a messy divorce. Every one of the OG pickup artists is an absolute joke. They were a big deal back in the day, but now they're just done. The PUA movement basically defined man as he who sleeps with women. And the more women you slept with, the more of a man you were. It was always a shallow movement, and the leaders of that movement literally lost everything. They lost their reputation, they lost their wealth, they lost their loved ones, they lost their sanity. We even had other clowns from this era. We had Ru Shui, and Ru Shui actually became a Christian, repented everything. He stopped selling all his courses and products and everything like that. And I don't know what he's doing now, right? I don't follow this stuff anymore, but he failed. Like, he's in a terrible mental state right now. Then we had Rollo Tomasi, who he's old now, but he's still speaking about the same topics that he spoke about back 10 years ago. Rollo Tomasi is also a spent force. Even so, there are some gems from this era. This is one of my all-time favorite books, The Book of Puck, written by an anonymous author. We don't know who wrote this book, and it's just great. It talks about frame in the correct way, and it doesn't treat women like a bunch of mindless cattle to be slain. But like I said, this movement was dying when I joined it. Then it completely died. It got nuked when the Gamergate event happened. So this Gamergate event happened in 2015, and it was a ridiculously important cultural event that may have been kind of forgotten today, but it literally shaped the paradigm of the masculinity movement that you are currently living through. This was the first clash between feminism and the anti-feminism. Literally caught fire, right? This is actually where the term SJW comes from. This is the event that kicked off the whole conversation about what it means to be a man versus a woman in the modern environment. So you may have been too young to appreciate the Gamergate event when it happened, but basically a bunch of radical feminists, the blue hair type, they hijacked all the major gaming related media outlets, and they made the case that gamers, men, and the entire industry was just sexist and misogynist and oppressive, and that all games should include women and minorities. These harpies literally put fake accusations on men and ruined lives to make their case. In fact, the whole Me Too movement is nothing but an echo of Gamergate. I'm sure there were cases of actual assault and harassment, but to use that as a political tool, that's just wrong, right? So the response to all this was led by Sargon of Akkad and other creators who used to get hundreds of thousands of views by taking down the feminists. This new anti-feminist movement defined man as he who does not take shit from women, as opposed to the old PUA definition of he who beds the most women. The anti-feminists like Sargon of Akkad had become kind of the rulers of the men's space in 2016 on YouTube. Then a new man arose and a new vision arose from the ashes of that battlefield. Jordan Peterson had entered the chat. The Bill C-16 controversy got going around the end of 2016, starting of 2017, and one man arose to challenge this. This man's a straight G, right? From day one, he was impressive. He had been developing his mental fortitude and his skill at speaking for decades as a professor. He was sharp, he was refined, he was extremely well read, to say the least. He knew the literature inside and out. It's very hard to debate a man like that. His views were aligned with the anti-feminists, but he diverged because he was not an atheist. He believed in God, believed in the Bible, and said so, talked about it a lot. So he defined man as he who bears responsibility for himself and others around him, which is a huge step up from the past definitions of man for sure. He basically dominated the discourse and was the face of the masculinity YouTube space for a straight 2-year period. 2018 is when he was in his prime. He was crushing it in his debates. His industrial level demolition of Cathy Newman was a piece of art, worth watching the entire interview.
You cited freedom of speech in that. Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I have exercised my freedom of speech.
You get my point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on. So and that is what you should do. But you're exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
So you haven't sat there and... I'm just trying to work that out. I mean...
Ha, gotcha.
You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head. Yeah, it took a while.
It did, yeah.
It took a while.
At the same time, he also had this Cambridge Hall interview. He won this debate, basically, where they discussed the gender pay gap. The feminists were intellectually dominated by Peterson, and he basically showed that the anti-feminists actually had something. They were talking about actual legitimate circumstances which men were facing. Men were really struggling to find opportunity and meaning in life. Peterson moved the Overton window in the right direction and laid the foundation for the Hamza era. He showed a problem. He showed that men are failing out, they're struggling to fix themselves, they're addicted to porn. Men aren't this privileged oppressor class and misogynist that they're made out to be. In fact, depression rates and suicide was actually higher in men. Men were less than 40% of college graduates. That they don't make more money if you do the statistical analysis correctly, which of course the feminists didn't bother to do. In fact, men were in the worst place they had been since the beginning of mankind. And unfortunately, this is where Peterson starts to lose his mind. They had to literally fly him to Russia for immediate psychiatric help, so he's out of the game. Just as the pandemic starts, he's out of the game. When people needed him most, he was out of the game. This is when men's mental health just falls off a cliff, right? Lockdowns start, isolation happens. And there were some self-improvement type channels out there, but at this time, self-improvement was not linked to masculinity. The self-improvement channels at this time were, Ali Abdaal, there was Better Ideas. And these guys would tell you to do the right thing. They would give you the right information, but they couldn't give you inspiration. And the world needed inspiration. And there arose Hamza. Hamza starts doing his gymnast ring workouts in the park and showed that you didn't need gyms. You didn't need this infrastructure to get jacked. If you wanted to put in the work, you could find a way to do so. And when all these other self-improvement guys were kind of androgynous, Hamza walks in looking like a Chad, takes YouTube by storm. As soon as Hamza enters the fray, everybody kind of becomes irrelevant. Everybody becomes a footnote to the rise of Hamza, and it was glorious. Hamza took the wisdom of Jordan Peterson and taught it in simple terms that anybody can understand. He had the body for credibility. He had the honesty to show the inner workings of self-improvement and mental health. Hamza defined man as he who does the hard work, especially when he doesn't feel like it. Absolute Chad message. That's why we love Hamza. Hamza started getting serious momentum somewhere in the, when he was 300,000, 500,000 subscribers area. He put out a community post asking for applications to be his thinker. And you bet I jumped on it, like literally on the same day. I can still remember getting Hamza's email from his private email, and I remember thinking, this is a golden opportunity. And it was. For months, I worked with him and helped him get closer to the 1 million subscribers milestone. I would get up at 2 a.m. to do calls with him because of the time zone difference, right? He lived in UK, I lived in the US. And I didn't see it as a sacrifice. I enjoyed it because I believed in the mission. I even did calls with him during army training. I would sit on the top of my Humvee and do calls on Discord on my phone. And this is when Andrew Tate blows up the internet, right? Andrew Tate low-key reprogrammed all our minds, including Hamza's, including mine. And Sneeko is just an extreme case of the absolute power of persuasion that Andrew Tate exemplifies. The man's a genius to your business, and paired with the speaking skills of a Roman orator, plus he was built like a draft horse. Of course he was going to conquer the internet, and he did. I still remember discussing Tate with Hamza. We were discussing whether, Hamza should publicly support Tate or we should just ignore it at the time. And we both were fans. The sex allegations hadn't dropped yet. This was the end of Hamza's golden era where he made the best content that he has ever made. And even then we were running out of topics. He had already covered the basics, he covered working out, meditation, all this. We didn't know what to talk about next. At this time, he was going hard against the social media companies. He got cancelled on Instagram, he got cancelled on Skillshare. And that's when we stopped working with each other. So let's do a quick review. Tate's a brilliant man who sold his soul to the devil. Next, we have First Man, who cannot deliver on promises to save his life. We have Sneeko, who's a joke. We have Fresh and Fit, who's an even worse joke. We have CEO of Testosterone, who is another degen passport bro. We have Jordan Peterson, who was truly brilliant, but now lies broken. Then finally, we come to Hamza. Hamza is by far, at this current time, the best influencer in this space. I know him personally, he really does care, and he is actually the same on and off camera. This video will be me talking directly to Hamza because I know he's likely watching this, and I will break down the criticism into parts and explain it clearly. I'm not going to go easy on you, Hamza, because of our past friendship. I'm going to be brutally honest, and you're just going to have to deal with it. First, your handling of your ex-girlfriend was hypocritical, and here's why. You showed her on camera. Literally a million guys knows what she looked like. You talked openly about how you demolished her in bed and put her on her knees and all this like graphic detail. It means a million guys have visualized her getting railed, like absolutely demolished. That's the level of a porn star, you know what I mean? And you left her for even more attractive girls. The problem isn't that you broke up with the female, like that happens even with the best of intentions, right? The problem is that you created another alpha widow, you created more degeneracy on the society, and you potentially caused irreparable damage because you wanted to party and be social and do business. You couldn't hold the commitment. The problem is you talked about having kids with her, publicly even, and then you pulled the rug, couldn't go through with it, right? The problem is that you were giving advice on finding a wife and having a long-term relationship when you didn't really know anything about that topic. You talk about the degeneration of Western women, but you just created potentially one more broken female. You took a potential traditional wife, as it were, and made her undateable and unmarriageable because any man who wants to marry this chick, right, is going to come across videos of you talking her in the most sexual way. Now, I can understand completely that relationships can fail and things happen, people drift away, but to do this in public does her more harm than does you. You talk about how she lost attraction for you when you stopped acting like James Bond and started being more authentic to yourself. You're basically saying that you need to play a character to keep attraction, but that's not practical. It doesn't make sense because no one can play a character forever. To summarize, you clearly were giving out advice in a very authoritative manner, like a teacher, like a leader, about a topic that you were simply not an expert on. You were a student in that topic, but you were speaking as though you were an expert. It's just the wrong thing to do, but it was done. You shouldn't share bedroom secrets about a girl online. That's just obvious at this point. You shouldn't show her face. And you've basically allowed a million guys to visualize her getting smashed, right? So here's a recommendation. Obviously, don't do that. And of course, change out the thumbnails where your old GF shows up. Delete the videos which she actually appears, because it's not about you. It's about her dignity as a woman. And here's a personal prediction. I don't know if this will happen, but I think there's a small chance that they do get back together in the future. But regardless, the second criticism that Hamza gets is that he keeps on flip-flopping on his views. So you, Hamza, yes, you change your mind quite often. That in itself is not wrong. But whenever people criticize you saying you are always changing your mind, you've changed, you always come back with this NPC reply, this kind of a pre-programmed script saying, oh, bro, you haven't? Like that's some kind of genius comeback. It's not a genius comeback, it's just a linguistic trick to avoid the issue. The accusation is that your ego is too big, and your NPC reply is, yeah, it's because I'm so successful, guys. I make so much money. The recommendation I give you is stop calling yourself cult leader. That's where the problem truly arises. Because otherwise, people will understand that you're just a leader, a solid man worth following, but you're not a cult leader, right? To call yourself a cult leader, it means you have to be perfect. You have to do everything exactly correct because you're leading a cult. I think it's outlived its usefulness, right? It's kind of cringe at this point. Think about it. When you're 50 years of age, are you still going to be calling yourself a cult leader? Probably not. It'll be so stupid if you're calling yourself 50 as a cult leader. So the branding needs to change, and the cult leader thing has to be phased out, and the time for phasing it out is right now. While it's true that different viewers want different things, and you cannot possibly please everybody, it wouldn't hurt to show viewers some gratitude, especially because you pioneered the whole gratitude type messaging on YouTube, told us how it's important to have gratitude for good mental health. If you show gratitude to anything, it has to be your viewers, surely. Especially as you move on to a businessman and you want to make businessman slash entrepreneurship type content, the cult leader branding doesn't even really help you or apply. Just take it around back, shoot it, be done with it. Finally, go to Adonis School. Is Hamza a scammer? Is Adonis School a scam? No, absolutely not. Adonis School is a legit product with tons of great content inside. The courses are legit, the calls are legit. I've been in Adonis School probably since day one. Hamza added me to it. And I've learned enough from Adonis School to build my own community and courses. So what's the future of the masculinity movement? I think in its current form, it's dead. And think about it. It's not actually that masculine to talk about masculinity 24/7. It's like that old Marcus Aurelius quote, waste no more time arguing what it means to be a good man. Be one. The modern version of this is waste no more time arguing what a masculine man should be. Be one. So that's where we are at the masculinity movement. It's kind of everything which is supposed to be said has already been said. I think everybody kind of sick and tired of the same old talking points, and we want to focus on a higher tier of knowledge. I've championed the esoteric health movement for a while. That's only one aspect of it. Hamza is essentially going to be doing the business version of this. He's going to be providing business knowledge that nobody else is talking about. I think it's very valuable. I think it's the right space to be in for him. The next wave of creators is going to lead a new type of movement. The new breed will be authentic, but not authentic for shock value. The new breed will be polarizing, but not to be polarizing for its own sake. I believe that the next wave of creators will speak more openly about religion and prayer, and I welcome this change. And I believe that the next generation of creators will be more masculine without yapping about masculinity 24/7. I want real men who've actually lived life to step up and start talking. I want to hear from firemen, police officers, soldiers, doctors, engineers, fathers, grandfathers, plumbers, electricians, lumberjacks, and so many life experiences which I've just never had. Earlier in the video, I talked about how there's different definitions of man, and each of these movements had a different definition. Well, here's my definition. Man is he who is capable of reason and moral judgment. Man is he who commands his destiny to duty. Man is he who bridges the bestial and the divine. And first and foremost, man is he who masters himself. I'm just sick and tired of this whole masculinity movement. It feels like a LARP. You know what LARPing is? LARPing is basically when a bunch of guys, they pick up foam, shields, and swords, and they do a mock battle. And from afar, it might look like a real battle, but when you get close to it, it's kind of a joke. That's what the masculinity movement is slowly becoming. And I'm just done with it. I reject it. I'm just too old for it. And I ask the question, what comes next? The movement of self-improvement and masculinity is set to crumble under the weight of its own contradictions. the self-improvement, think about it, self-improvement is self-centered, and any man of true worth will be dissatisfied with this. And of course, speaking about masculinity all the time isn't even that masculine. So is the Hamza era of self-improvement and masculinity really over? I think so. I think these small dick influencers who cannot reinvent themselves will die out. But what about Hamza himself? Well, Hamza, I think he's just getting started.